Okay, so hi everybody. If people are in the chat, can you say hello? If sound is coming through and everything. Okay, so cool stuff. Does this mean that you can hear me? Hi everybody, I see 7 people here. Is the audio okay and everything else? Okay, great, thank you. And more importantly, it sounds okay. You can hear me when I'm talking? Okay, great. Thank you so much. So we'll wait until we actually get to 9 a.m. Yeah, I guess while we're waiting, if you want to say where you're coming in from, I tried to schedule this so that it would be good for most people in the world, except for poor folks in the Pacific area like Hawaii. So yeah, it would be interesting to see where everybody is from. Also, if people have specific questions they want to ask, go ahead and, I'm trying to pull it up on my phone to, oh, that was dumb. All right, let me turn the sound off. There we go. Just want to make sure that it's coming through okay. Yeah, so we're almost at the start time, so we'll get started very soon. Okay, it is officially 9 o'clock. So I'm going to get ahead and start talking. So before I begin, think about the questions that you have that you'd like me to answer. And so I have a little short presentation that I'll go through. The goal here is to make sure that I'm able to answer the questions that people have. And it also helps me test out live streaming and whether that's a good option for things like this. So first, let me talk a little bit about how grad admissions work. This is stuff that you probably likely already know, but if not, it's good to go over it. So let me pull up my presentation here. Okay. So, one second. All right. All right. Okay, here we go. All right. So first, how do you choose a grad school? There are many people who think that ratings are the most important way to find a grad school, and it's an okay place to start. There are better rankings than others, and so I think that U.S. News Reports, News and World Reports, and the Times Global Rankings are not as good, at least in the United States, as csrankings.org. And here you can go and you can click on the things that you're interested in to find grad schools that might be a good fit for you. But you should only use this as a starting place. You should always go to the individual schools and look at the professors' web pages to make sure that they're actually a good fit for you. And then you can apply to those schools once you've found this sort of way to find the places that might be a good place to apply. And so this would be my recommendation for one place to start. And so, for example, if you're interested in artificial intelligence and NLP, then here's a list of places that might be good to apply, like Carnegie Mellon, Maryland, Cornell, Stanford, and so on. But you should use that as a starting place. Actually go to the web pages for the faculty here and see if they're actually a good fit. Let me say a little bit about why Maryland might be a good place to go to grad school. It's not too cold. It's a relatively mild climate most of the year. When it's unpleasant is during the summer. It gets a little hot and humid, but you'll often be doing internships elsewhere, so you get to enjoy the good weather when it's not the summer here. We're also well connected to the world because we are right outside the capital of the US, Washington, D.C., so there are international airports very close with flights to most places in the world. And so you will want to go home during your graduate studies, and it will be easier to do that while here. It's also, because it's the nation's capital, home to embassies from most nations in the world. And so if you do need to get a visa or get a passport renewed, you'll be able to do that in DC. If you go to other places that aren't near consulates or embassies, it will be more of a burden for you to do so. And being the nation's capital, we have a lot of arts and culture. We have lots of museums that are free, and it's a very metropolitan area. You can get food from your home region and from everywhere else in the world. We also have a shiny new building on campus, the Reed Center for Computer Science and Engineering Innovation. And the community surrounding the University of Maryland isn't too expensive. It's a lot cheaper than, say, the Bay Area. It's not as cheap as other places, for example, in the Midwest, but it's relatively inexpensive among major US cities, especially on the coast. I also want to talk a little bit about how grad admissions work. This is not particularly unique to the University of Maryland. This is how most places in the United States work. So you submit an application, and then there is an initial triage step where the application is checked for completeness, that all the letters are in, that there are cutoffs for TOEFL and things like that. And if you're below those cutoffs, then your application won't be considered. But then after you get past that first stage of triage, then the applications are sorted into areas. And so I work in the natural language processing area. So we will review those applications. I also look at applications from machine learning and sometimes human-computer interaction. But typically, I will focus on natural language processing. And when the faculty from some of the other areas says, hey, Jordan, you should look at this, I will then do that. Then the review happens in earnest in January. And sometimes we do interviews for students just to see if they're a good fit, to double check I'm interested in the student and to make sure that it would be a good match. Those interviews often happen in February. And then as soon as possible, we start sending out the admissions decisions for our top students. And then we invite people to come to campus, usually in March. And then you accept, then the deadline is usually April 15th. And so I usually do not encourage or make it a requirement for students to email me if they're interested in working with me as a PhD student. But one place where that can be helpful is if for some reason the application was not complete and it might have gotten stuck at the triage step, then I can look for it and try to get it unstuck. So that's really the only case where emails help. And yeah, so let me go through some common misconceptions. Sriram from Brown had a great video covering this in much more detail, but I want to go through this relatively quickly. So the first misconception is that you pay for a PhD. And so that isn't the case. Most PhDs at top schools in the United States are fully funded, and so you will have either a teaching assistantship or a research assistantship throughout your time at the university. And so it's not a lot of money, but you can survive on it. And the another misconception is that you need to email a professor before you make an application. That's not necessary. The application is all you really need. Another misconception is that the overall school ranking matters. And so that is not the case. So for example, Harvard is an excellent world-renowned university, but in my specific area, natural language processing, they don't have a lot of strength there at the moment. So it wouldn't necessarily be a good choice to get a PhD at Harvard, even though everybody in the world knows that Harvard is an excellent school. And the way that a school is great for an undergrad is not necessarily the same way that it's great for a PhD. And while the individual reputation of a school in its subject area is more important for the PhD, it's not the case that you need to go to absolutely the best trained grad program. You need to go to the place where you have the best fit with a particular faculty member, because you're going to be working very closely with them in the same sorts of areas that they work on, and that needs to be a good fit for you to be successful. And if you go to a Stanford or a University of Washington or MIT, and you don't have a good fit for the faculty, you won't be as successful as if you went to a slightly lower ranked place and did excellently. And so you need to optimize for fit with faculty, even if it's not at the very creme de la creme in terms of graduate schools. Another misconception is that you need to do well in classes. So this is less about the application process, but more about the environment once you get to campus. The goal of a PhD is to do good research, and classes help you do good research. And there are minimum requirements in terms of grades that you need to have to remain in the program. That as long as you're meeting those thresholds, you don't need to have top scores. And this is also true of the application. You need to show that you have the potential to do good research, and grades aren't as big of a deal in and of themselves. They're part of a holistic picture, but research potential is really what we're trying to optimize for. Okay, and then the last thing that I'll mention in terms of misconceptions is that it's often been the case that people feel that they need to spare my feelings or politely let me down if they're going to another school and not enrolling at the University of Maryland. That is not the case. And so we have a limited number of positions that we can offer. And so if you, as quickly as possible, tell us that you're not going to attend the University of Maryland, that helps us give the slot to somebody else. And so it helps me out because I want to have a certain number of PhD students next year. And if the top choice doesn't want to come to the University of Maryland, that helps me go down the list and make an offer to more people. So it doesn't have to be polite. It's better if it's fast. And so you can just say, sorry, I'm going to the University of Arkansas. And so just tell me that, and we'll move on, and no hard feelings. Okay, so the last thing that I want to talk about is the kind of student that I'm looking for. And this isn't an exhaustive list. And so I will work with students from all areas. And if there's a really excellent student who wants to work with me, it doesn't have to be a precise match here, but I'm more likely to work with students who do match what is on this list. So particularly, I'm looking for students who are interested in explaining how machine learning models work to a human and to help humans collaborate with these artificial intelligence agents. I'm looking for students who are really excited about question answering, both in terms of building new data sets, evaluation, and building models that work more like humans do in answering questions. I'm also looking at the symbiosis between communities of interest in the real world and how they match up to research problems that we have in artificial intelligence. And so one thing that I've looked at is the trivia community and how they can make good training data for artificial intelligence systems that try to hold a conversation or answer questions. I've looked at the community of people who play the game diplomacy and how they might help us build better agents for negotiation. And that's another topic that I'm interested in, negotiation. How do you build systems that negotiate with humans and with other computerized agents to find common ground, to convince another agent, either a human or a computer, to do something for you. And then lastly, I've probably the topic that I spent the longest on in my career is sense making. So you have a large collection of documents. How do you figure out what's going on in those documents with a human in the loop? We've used topic models for this. We've used neural models. This is something that I'd like to continue working on. Okay, and if you're interested in any of these areas, I think it would be a good fit for us. So people who work with me typically begin as a teaching assistant in their first year, unless there's a particular funding need that needs to be spent immediately and there's a good match with a first-year student. It's rare that people do an RA in their first year, but it does happen. And then after the first year of TA, they switch to RA as long as I have money. And thus far, I've had a pretty good track record at funding students who are research productive. And so you don't need to send me an email if you're interested in applying, just apply. If there's a particularly good match and you work on things that are very, very closely related to my interests, it might be a good idea to send me an email. It never hurts to send me an email. I have a template email that I try to reply to everyone who emails me with general information, but if you're a particularly good fit, it might not hurt to send me an email. It doesn't hurt, but it's not a requirement. And so there's a common misconception that you need to have a lot of publications to get a PhD admittance. It doesn't hurt, but really what we're looking for is the potential of doing research. And so hopefully either in your project or in your recommendation letters, there will be a discussion of your ability to do the sorts of things that are required for research, frame a problem, run experiments, diagnose what went wrong, and create some synthesis that explains how artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing works. Okay, and with that, I'll open it up to questions. So if you have a question, please leave a comment here. And things that you can ask about living in Maryland, the courses that you might need to take to get admission, or the courses that you would take once you're at Maryland, teaching assistants and research assistants, any questions about the logistics of that. You can ask about my ongoing projects, and so you may want to check out my webpage as well. That lists of projects there. And I'm also happy to talk about the broader natural language processing environment at Maryland, which is the CLIP lab, the Computational Linguistics and Information Processing Lab, or anything else about the University of Maryland. So please leave a chat if you have a question on any of these topics. And so I think I will give 2 minutes if there are questions. And if there aren't any questions by then we'll end the stream there. I will also check my email in case there are any questions that came in over email. Okay, not seeing anything there. Yeah, so thank you for those joining in. This was an experiment for me. This is my first time doing this. And so maybe this will be useful for people even who weren't here live. Yeah, so if you do end up applying, best of luck wherever you end up. And if anyone is joining from India, happy Diwali. Okay, not seeing any questions yet. I'll give it 1 more minute. Okay, so, all right, here we go. All right, so the question is, could IELTS be submitted after the application deadline? So this is something that is a little tricky. And so, yes, you definitely could submit after the deadline. It's usually better to get things in by the deadline. And the deadline is typically officially mid-December, but the review doesn't really start usually until after the new year. And so people go home for holidays and things like that. So if it's complete by then, you're probably okay. In some cases, people are really excited to look at the applications that came in, and sometimes they'll do it right at December 16th or whatever, the day after the deadline, but that's pretty unlikely because people are usually busy with the end of the semester and don't do that. So if you get it in by the time people look at it, it's okay. So if it's 20 minutes late, then you'll definitely not have a problem. If it's 2 months late, you'll definitely have a problem. In between, it's a little more fluid, but it's not like it's checked at 12:01 right after the deadline, and anybody who doesn't have their stuff in gets thrown out. And I mentioned why it's sometimes good to email me. There was someone whose application I was looking out for. I really wanted to work with this person, and their transcript didn't get sent by their school. They didn't know this. They thought their application was complete, but it didn't appear in the stuff that I could review. And so I went and I was able to check that their transcript hadn't arrived, and we were able to work it out and get it fixed. And so even in February, it can get fixed, but it takes more effort from you and me and everybody else. So it really is best to get things in at the appropriate time. Okay, another comment or question. Okay, yeah, so one question about the broader environment at UMD. I'll come back to that. And another question is projects done with NLP on computational social science. So that's an excellent question and a little easier to answer. I guess we don't need the slides anymore, so I'll turn those off. So one thing is looking at misinformation. So trying to detect when the information that you're seeing on social media or on a news site is correct or not, and how does that get spread? How does that get disseminated? Hal Dalmay, another faculty at Maryland, is looking at creating systems to help moderators of social media sites. Philip Resnick is interested in framing. So how does a message get turned into something that reflects someone's political views or their values? So you can talk about the same concept in different ways. So in the American political system, a tax on the money that rich parents give to their children is called a death tax by our right-wing Republicans, but an estate tax by our left-wing Democrats, which shows their different takes on the same concept. Hal Dalmay is also interested in issues of fairness, and so am I. We recently had a paper on fairness in question answering systems. So those are some of the places where it intersects with computational social science. There are additional people who work on similar things in the iSchool at Maryland who aren't necessarily in CLIP, the Computational Linguistics Lab, but yeah, that's definitely something that has a lot going on at the moment. And Maryland is a good place for that sort of thing because we are near the nation's capital. And so there are a lot of think tanks and research organizations that work on politics and social problems. And so we connect a lot with them. Okay, so let me talk about the NLP environment at Maryland. So there are 10 faculty in natural language processing and information processing at Maryland and inside the CLIP lab. I won't talk about all of them. But let me go through a few. So, because some of them work more on the data science side and less on NLP. I already mentioned Hal Dalmay and Philip Resnick. Someone I haven't talked about is Maureen Karpuat. So she works mostly on machine translation, particularly on low resource machine translation. So languages that don't have a lot of data, and looking at the style of machine translation. So either translating in a more formal way, an informal way. So right now, machine translation is kind of a one-size-fits-all problem, but you might want to tailor it for specific situations. Like if you're translating on social media, you might not translate it in the same way that you would translate a newspaper article. Rachel Rudinger is another person I haven't mentioned yet. So she works on common sense artificial intelligence and some of the more old school AI stuff like semantics and things like that. So she's relatively new and looking for new students. Doug Ord is a faculty member whose specialty is on information retrieval, so search engines, things like that. Then we also have Wei Ai, who also works on information retrieval and interaction with ride-sharing services. Vanessa Frias Martinez works on how to use data to help governments understand their populations better. And Loika Rashid looks at business and networks and how information flows and things like that. So that's a brief overview. Go to the CLIP webpage, clip.umiax.umd.edu, and you can click on the people, and you can see all of their web pages there. I don't know exactly who's taking students. Doug Ord may be retiring in the not too distant future, so he may be less likely to take students at the moment. But I have no reason to believe that the other folks I mentioned are not taking students. Vanessa Frias Martinez is on sabbatical this year, so she may not be too involved in admissions this year, but she may also be involved since she didn't take on new students last year because she was going on sabbatical this year. So I don't know about that one. Okay, so the already did computational social science. So a question is, should an applicant already have published a scientific paper? Would it be a plus? Yes, definitely a plus, but not a requirement. So it's good to have a paper under your belt, but some papers are better than others. And so like you shouldn't publish in predatory journals and things like that just to have a paper. Like research experience and research potential is really what matters. So you should have a good piece of research that shows that you can think deeply and engage with the kinds of things that you need to do research in this field. And it's okay if you don't have a published paper. Hopefully your letter writers can talk about how you are prepared to do research. Yes, and feel free to send me an email if you're interested in particular things. You may get the standard response for potential PhD students. There are just a lot of people who are interested, and so I don't have time to do personal replies to everybody. But it's always good to know. And later when I'm reviewing applications, it's sometimes useful to have a line of contact that I can go back to and ask questions if there was a particularly good fit for research interests. Okay. Yeah, so how important is research experience for the master's program? Would experience of working in NLP in industry count for admissions? So for masters, research experience is not that necessary. It helps, but the master's program is the bar is lower, and in many cases, Maryland has typically had a relatively small master's program, but at other schools, the master's program is much larger. And so the bar is lower, and you basically just need to have good grades and demonstrate the ability to do well in master's level courses. So research experience is not necessary for a master's, unlike a PhD. Okay, a question is, how do I approach a professor about being my advisor knowing I'll need a lot of hand-holding in the first year or two? So that's fine, and like that's not abnormal. The whole point of a PhD is to learn how to do research and to get the support that you need to do research. So one of the things that we do at Maryland is we have buddies, a senior student assigned to every incoming student to help them get acclimated both to living in the United States, which is often new for people, also for being a PhD student, which is new for everybody, and working with our computational resources, which requires some getting used to. And I think one thing to keep in mind is that it's not a challenge that you need to overcome by sheer force of will. You're part of a group. And so all of the students in the CLIP lab sit together, they work together, they help each other, and you're not on your own. So you'll make friends who come from around the world. You will work on similar research projects, and you will help each other out. And you will have different skills that other people do not, and they will have skills that you don't have, and you will all work together to learn how to do this. It's a little bit like boot camp in a military context. You learn from each other, and you form really close bonds. And some of my strongest relationships, even to this day, were the people who I went to grad school with. And even if we weren't working on similar things, there's really a tight connection that gets formed there. And so they help each other out. And there's also a lot of support that comes from the university. There's grad orientations, and the grad director at Maryland, Tom, is fantastic. And he also helps people out to navigate the system. There's also the International Student Services Organization that helps you navigate immigration. And for many countries of origin, there's also a student association, so that if you need to find a particular kind of wheat or bread or rice or seasoning, they will tell you where to get it. And or if you want to see the latest movies from Lagos, what theater in DC has them, and things like that. So you're not on your own. There's a community to support you, both in the lab, at the university, in the region, and also because all of the embassies from around the world are here, they usually have events. So for example, we just had Tag der Deutschen Einheit, and so the German embassy put on some events for that. Okay. I don't see any additional questions here, so I think I will declare this experiment a success. Thank you all for joining in and asking questions. I appreciate that. This is my first time doing this, so If you come to this video later after the official live stream has ended, you can also feel free to put questions here. Again, you can send me an email as well. Thank you all very much for joining me on this Friday. If your semester is like mine, I know this is a busy time of year, so thank you for taking time out of your schedule to do this. And best of luck on your graduate admissions process. And even if you don't end up at Maryland, I wish you the best of luck in your career, and I hope to see you at conferences. And good luck. Talk to you later. Bye.